Hey guys, Kyle the Death Knight of Anime here, bringing you my review of The Promised Neverland episode 10. So, I really have to jump in and talk about the tone of the episode from the beginning right up to the point where we see Norman leaving Gracefield, and even a little bit beyond that as well, because despite how sad and somber it is to see Norman pretty much leave Gracefield and not even knowing about what happens to him, except for us manga readers, wink wink. Um, it never actually felt like a goodbye, but rather the start of a new beginning. And considering what's going on in the manga right now, that's more true than some might realize. But even just the little touches of Norman giving Ray and Emma the information on the wall is enough to tell us that, yeah, even without him, there's still a light at the end of the tunnel. And that's proven even more because of the tone that the episode was taking. Because like I said, from the beginning of the episode to where we see Norman Norman leave Gracefield, it had a very somber tone, but with basically with the tone of a new hope, of still hope, of holding on to hope, and that tone, it kind of continued on even further along as the episode progressed as well. Because this episode, it was pretty depressing after Norman left, but it did get really depressing after Norman left. But even then, it still held on to, that ending kind of proved that, yeah, we're basically going forward. And having said that, I don't want to detract from just how emotional the actual farewell itself was, though, because it was definitely, I'd say that the farewell of seeing Norman leave was definitely on par with the manga. In fact, it might have even been better because of the added flashbacks and the way it was built up. Also, if there's anything I think Emma's little outburst and last minute effort to convince Norman to escape proved to us, is that how much Norman himself has, like, how much Norman himself had already thought this through. And if there was any other option of doing this that didn't involve him leaving, he would have already escaped. So now in that moment, all he could really do was leave Gracefield peacefully and put his hope in Ray and Emma. But of course that last part, it didn't really go 100% as planned, because man, I said this already, but man, did the depression get piled on with this episode. And I think the most surprising part, for as someone who's read the manga, like, I think the most surprising part that pretty much still is like, whoa, what the fuck kind of moment for me, was just how browbeaten Ray was after Norman left. I mean, when it comes to Emma, we basically kind of already had a feeling she'd pretty much wind up broken and lose all hope and everything, and just wind up as this empty shell of a human being who just doesn't know what to do anymore. But and that was especially reinforced with how desperate Emma was, and how it was built up over these last couple episodes. But the thing of what makes how Ray broke down especially interesting, is that when you really look at what Ray was going through in this episode, it just shows us how, even though they both relied on Norman, Ray really put so much trust in him and hinged everything on him, that he had no idea that after Norman left Gracefield, Ray really had no idea even where to go after that. And because Promised Neverland is a shonen, I feel this is this series' sadistic way of saying to us, this is what happens when you place all your chips solely on one character. And granted, again, it's kind of one of those things where it did. And granted, it is kind of one of those things where a lot of the depression that Ray and Norman were going through was just kind of an interlude until basically the ending, where we see them all receive the resolve return. But yeah, it's really kind of interesting as to how that whole depressed state just really kind of affect how the depression of losing Norman affected Ray so much. Um, and once again, Isabella, in her own twisted way, is actually kind of showing what I feel to be her more sympathetic side, if that could be called that. And the thing I think that has gotten across with Isabella in this episode is that behind her cruelty, I'd say that Isabella is just as much a broken person as Emma and Ray are now, and but the only reason as to why she's accepted like what's happened to Norman a lot more is because she pretty much as an adult has already completely surrendered any hope of fighting the demons in place of silent obedience and desperate survival. And as I say this, I realize that one of those things it's that a lot of what we see of Isabella in this episode really makes me kind of want to see Isabella's backstory and what caused this basically shift to begin with. But I have my doubts we ever will find out because according to the authors of Promised Neverland, we are kind of getting close to the end game of the series, so to speak. So I don't know if we're ever going to get Isabella's backstory, but because of little scenes like that, it really kind of makes you wonder as to what caused, as to what led up to her snapping. Was it just that she kind of accepted that fighting the demons is impossible, or yeah, just what exactly is that basically caused her to kind of follow that notion of silent obedience and holding on to some kind of desperate means of survival almost. And you can even tell that's pretty much you can even tell that that's pretty much almost exactly what it is and what Isabella is almost going and what Isabella is thinking like and what Isabella's mindset is because when basically Norman asks her if she was happy. Isabella snapped. So Isabella basically snapped for a moment. So yeah, there's definitely Isabella is. You can definitely see that Isabella is desperate in her own way to kind of hold on to whatever she can almost. Now, one thing I will admit that I did have a problem with in this episode is again the artwork in certain scenes, and because the anime isn't being as detailed or expressive, the key moments of the episode, like the scene of Emma leaning up against the tree with that look of despair on her face, did feel a little like they were missing a little punch and a little extra emotional weight. But it's still pretty much served in order to get the purpose across, like of Emma just losing all hope and how much of an empty shell she was. But on an emotional level, it was lacking for sure. I will admit that much. Although it was lacking a bit of impact just from the fact that they didn't use any shading around the eyes, I do say that the last scene of Emma and Ray's resolve returning to them was freaking epic. And I know this is gonna sound sudden. Especially considering what Emma's been like. But in a way, just Ray and Emma having to go through that phase of being depressed and whatnot. That's actually one thing that's really going to work in Emma's favor. That's a bit of weird development that's going to work in Emma's favor for sure from here on out. Because from here, well, I can't necessarily speak for what happens for what she's going to become after they escape Gracefield. Let's just say from this point on, in these last two episodes, you guys are going to see a completely different Emma for sure. Like just the impact of losing Norman. It has evolved her. It has developed her for sure. All right. So I kind of need to talk. One final thing I need to talk about is that when the anime started, I kind of had a feeling I'd know where the season would end up, would end at. And while this episode still adapted quite a bit of content with this being episode 10, I am kind of wondering if it's going to stop just from shy of where I originally thought it would end, which if they or if it's going to end up or if the final episode is going to end exactly where I think it is, and which if they do it the way of just stopping shy of where I think it is going to end, then that's going to be an even bigger dick tease than if they end it the way I'm expecting them to. Although there is still, although I will admit, actually look, I read this. I look back on how many chapters are in this current arc we're in, and there is still a little bit of room in order to end it the way I think it is going to end up. But yeah, I think we're just gonna. I guess from here we're just gonna have to wait and see how it ends. Although one thing for certain, the climax is gonna be glorious. You should definitely expect a lot from that climax. But yeah, guys, that's my review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Mr. Crunchyroll. Dead Knight of Anime, signing off. Later, guys.